Hello, and welcome to Good News Rhode Island, the show about Rhode Island and the people and places and events that make Rhode Island a great place to live, that build our communities. And today we have one of the people who've brought more people to Rhode Island than anyone else I know. Barnaby Evans is here, who is founder and director of Waterfire Providence. He is an artist and an ecologist, an entrepreneur, a photographer, and we could go on and on. So welcome. There's no accurate name for what you do or who you are, I think.
I'm pleased to be here. So, like a trickster, troublemaker, an artist, all those things, yes.
Anyway, you have 2 honorary doctorates, and you're in the Rhode Island Heritage Hall of Fame, and you're known mostly for this installation, what we call an installation, which is a rather cold term for something that's very, very wonderful and has certainly touched all of us as we've gone into Providence and lived here. We have become more and more enamored of it. To make Rhode Island famous was not easy. And so I commend you for that. It would be hard to talk about you being here unless we talked about sort of the backstory. What is it that makes you work for the community? What was your upbringing? Why are you so engaged in community work as an artist and as an ecologist?
I think that's a very deep and thoughtful question, and I think many artists are driven by this sense of wanting to make connections or make sense of the world, and being part of a community is a very intimate part of the story of why I came to have the idea of creating Waterfire. And there's so many different ways to answer that. I often find that stories explain things best. Waterfire is primarily an attempt to bring people together in a community of sort of egalitarianism and equal access, but also of joy and beauty and surprise and engagement and sort of respect for each other. And what I'm referring back to is a whole, like most artists, a whole series of things. These traditional festivals, which often had a religious character, if we look back at the Venetian festivals or the Roman festivals or the ancient Greek festivals, even the Olympics, all of these had some sort of spiritual aspect to their presentation, but also this sense of community working together. So as a youth, many of my fondest memories were joining together with the community to do cleanups of a river or a valley or a park or something like that, or planting trees together as a group. And I really enjoyed this sense of one building something that was far larger than one person could do, when you could harness together all this positive energy from a group of people and help jointly make something happen. So Waterfire is a very interesting hybrid. It's usually referred to as an installation by art historians who want to talk about that it's something that happens in a particular place at a particular time. But it's really more about community and community building and engagement with each other. So I'm pleased that you immediately sense that. In a very broad sense, one of the immediate impulses I had was, through a lot of efforts led by the governor and the state and many people in Rhode Island, there was this effort to daylight the river and uncover the bridges and make this river park where we could walk along the river. But once you've done that, you've got a place for people to come, but that doesn't necessarily mean people are going to show up and be there. So I sort of felt that maybe one could use art and almost be a Pied Piper sort of thing, where you would create an art event and people would come see the art event and discover this resource of the river that was right there. I hadn't really intended it to be an ongoing festival, but the response was such that it was sort of overwhelmingly positive once we did that. But there were other elements there. I remember going to New York to visit an exhibition at an art gallery that also showed my work as a photographer, and suddenly being felt by the probably student intern at the front desk how he was making everyone who come into the gallery feel unwelcome. which is not part of the unspoken contract with an art gallery. You're supposed to be able to enjoy the work. If you want to buy it, you're welcome to buy it. If you're not going to buy the work, it's there for you to be able to enjoy. But this young man in his striking mohawk hairdo at the front desk was trying to make everyone feel that they weren't sophisticated enough or cool enough, or they didn't get it, and somehow they weren't quite welcome into the space. And it struck me particularly because the show was a friend of mine's, and the work on the wall was all about building community and engagement, and the sort of interesting dialogue that happens when people get together. So there was such a discontinuity between the attitude of this newly minted sort of art punk at the desk and the intention of the artist, that it primed my attention to that. And that whole weekend in New York, from gallery opening to show, I suddenly felt there was just an astonishing amount of elitism and exclusivity and restriction in the art world. And I came back saying, I'd really like to make a very large-scale artwork that is free of irony, about beauty, about aesthetics, about community engagement, but also that welcomes absolutely everyone into it so they feel they own it, they belong to it, they understand it. So that there's no sense that, that you don't belong. And then the idea came, could one use all of downtown as a canvas wherein one would try to actually use the people who come to the event to be part of the elements that come together to make this sort of magic happen. And we do it with volunteers, we do it with volunteer performers, we do it with professional performers, and we're always looking for new ideas, new ways to figure out how one might make the surprise keep changing. So for people who've been to Waterfire once or twice, they may not realize that from night to night, it's astonishingly different. There are all sorts of different partnerships we do with many different members of the community.
Most people don't put the terms beauty and community and urban together.
I think it's very important to do that.
Because most people think beauty is the architecture. Mm-hmm. They don't think of the people and the usage of the buildings and the usage of the walking spaces. And I think only an artist could have done this.
Mm-hmm. I think, sadly, I think that may be true now because we've siloed people's expectations into different things. So entrepreneurs, in theory, are always looking at the financial return. When most entrepreneurs I know are interested in much beyond that, but just the way one gets permission and financing and encouragement to do stuff, it's always looking at the bottom line, and you still need to worry about those things. But I think all of us are looking in life for the experience of being alive. That's a quote from, you probably remember his name, Campbell.
Oh, Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell, which is, it's not so much I think his quote is, we're not so much looking for the meaning of life, but we're looking for the experience of being alive. And that comes through surprise, through engagement, through aesthetics, through beauty, and largely through interacting with each other. And so one of the things that's pleased me tremendously about the response to Waterfire is that people come and engage with each other with dignity and grace, and you see people saying excuse me and thank you and all this sort of thing. And it just sort of magically builds upon itself in what frankly is overcrowded. I mean, I think the popularity of Waterfire is not so much a testament to the power of the artwork itself, although I do think it's very powerful. I think it's more a testament to that all of us feel a deep need for us to come together as a community and engage each other in a positive way. And we really miss that. And as society becomes more mediated and we're interacting more through electronic email and text and on Skype, cell phones, the need to come together and see each other face to face and enjoy that real moment of the sun setting and the smell of the wood smoke and the sound of the music becomes something that we all appreciate more and more.
And that's very primitive.
Very primitive. It was. I wouldn't say primitive because primitive almost has a connotation of negativity. It's very ancient and very deep and very real. And it's at the heart of spirituality, it's the heart of religion, it's the heart of art, it's the heart of what makes a community truly strong and proud and engaged. And yes, it is primitive, but it's also still with us, and it's not by any means unsophisticated. There's a holism that we're just beginning to realize where being engaged in all your senses at once, in real life, looking at people in their eyes and respecting people and learning new music that you've never heard before, this strengthens us as people, as souls, as a community in a deep, deep way. And sadly, relatively few people in our society think in these terms now, and many artists don't think in these terms, but there are a whole series of artists who are intrigued with this larger definition. And the mere fact that it's so hard to define what Waterfire is lets you know how rarely people are trying to engage with things at this sort of with this approach.
I just feel like many places could be transformed by this same kind of process that you've gone through. The first time that I went, and you probably hear all these stories, and I'll be very quick.
I love hearing the stories. I love hearing the stories because it's all about stories. This is how we relate to things.
I came and I was astounded. I thought about it for probably a year and what it meant to be among all those people and hear that music coming as though from the depths, and all music, maybe world music, that showed our common heritage, and the sense that there was no fear there. It's peaceful. And we're looking at each other, as you say. I mean, you're close to people because it is.
Strangers will talk to each other at Waterfire.
In a new way.
And you are comfortable coming. One of the other things I'm very pleased about is women are comfortable coming to Waterfire alone. They feel safe, they feel engaged, and they also feel they can start conversations with people. Often you see people who move to a city, male or female, who don't know anyone, and they want to start conversations, and there are very few opportunities where you can have that. If I may, because we hear lots of stories, and I want to hear your story as well, but I hear Waterfire is also not a festival only, because it's also dealing with the symbolism of Waterfire is the symbolism of life and death, the opposition between fire and water, the balance that has to happen between the two, the suggestion that life happens when these two elements of creation and destruction are balanced, but which is creation and which is destruction. What's interesting is there's a yin-yang between the two. So fire is a symbol of life and creativity and inspiration and intellectual attainment and accomplishment and triumphalness, but it's also a symbol of destruction and death and loss and hell and pain. And just like that, water is also a symbol of life and cleanliness and fecundity and harvest and bounty and sanctity, but it's also a symbol of lack of foundation and rootlessness and insubstantiability and non-substance. It doesn't sustain life. It'll drown you. So when Ahab was swallowed by the whale and went deep under the water, this was a type of spiritual death. So water and fire are both seen as symbols of life and death, and they're both seen as in opposition to each other. Fire will put water out, and water will put fire out, and water will put fire out, but fire will boil water away to nothing. I sort of misspoke that. But so there's a very interesting balance there. And so although the piece is potentially very festive and very joyous and very beautiful, there are also these other elements which make the experience very rich. You can go to Waterfire and be celebrating we have many people who make declarations of love and marriage at Waterfire. At the same time, we have funeral ceremonies at Waterfire. And yet the whole community is in one place marking all of these moments in our lives, but also the chance to just go out with a grandchild or a new friend or meet someone, and we all do it in one place, sort of bathed in this sort of warmth light of the fire. So there's a tremendous amount of symbolism and subtlety and engagement there on many, many levels, and that's partially why it's so attractive to many people.
You began as a scientist.
That's true.
How did you make that leap?
I don't think that's a leap at all. I think science and art are very intimately connected. They're both about questing, thinking, looking at new connections, being open to ideas, and I think beauty and elegance is as much of science as it is of art. So I think that distinction is a little bit artificial in culture. I see all the traditional artists from the Renaissance were all the scientists of the same period. So that, I think, is a union. But my interest in the particular science I studied was ecology, which is about the interrelatedness of things and the multi-leveled complexity of how all these things fit together. And that is, we actually are sort of stepping into the psychological ecology of urban space and trying to add missing ingredients to make it flourish as an ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So you can think of it from an ecological perspective, and we do think of it with all those levels of engagement and involvement.
I think of, I've worked in the inner city, what's called the inner city,
sure.
Far away from the towers and the suits, as one says. And I just wish that there were some kind of art that could go in and begin to build community in such a disarming way. Mm-hmm. In South Providence, in South sure. End, in Boston. Those areas need this kind of spirit and this kind of depth more than anywhere else because we have bankrupted them.
I agree with you. I think also, and that's part of our mission at Waterfire, is to make sure we build a place where everyone feels welcome, because I worry a little bit about exporting art that is focused on one particular aspect of the community, whereas I want to make sure they feel welcome and able to come to an event that's presented entirely for free downtown as valued members of our larger community.
Well, so, I completely agree with that as well, but I just
wonder, think there is possibility for that with art.
Using that kind of thinking.
Yep, I agree.
This kind of, I don't know, it's new world, new millennium, whatever it is, moving into these areas that are almost burned out, and to say, this can happen here.
And what's most needed in those communities, well, I shouldn't be so presumptuous to say most needed, but one of the things that's so seriously needed in those communities is a sense of hope, a sense of vision, a sense of possibility. We often have hired people from the neighborhoods. We're based in Olneyville, and I'm often surprised that the distance that they perceive to their horizon is measured in blocks. It's not measured in terms of all the possibilities that are open to them. So very often, just exposure to the arts is a huge opening of a doorway into people's future. We had one of the stories which I love to share with people is we were at Waterfire one night. It wasn't at Waterfire, it was in the afternoon. It was a few days after a Saturday. And it was a construction worker who was doing the structural steel for what became Providence Place, the big mall downtown. And he came up to us after work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with his hard hat and his overalls and his steel-toed work boots and his lunch pail. And he was moving through the park, and he called us over because all the anchors are these 200-pound anchors that we were lifting out of the mud. He said, I just got to tell you, I love Waterfire. This is this construction work. And I said, well, that's great. And he said, I was here last Saturday with my wife and my kids and my mother-in-law, my mother-in-law's sister, and we were here almost till midnight, and we didn't have one fight all night long. And I said, that's great. And he said, no, you don't understand. We always go everywhere with 2 cars because someone's going home early. And I didn't know what to say, but he kept talking. And he said, I'm going to say something that sounds kind of funny, but this Waterfire thing, it's almost like it's art or something. And I just love that. Because what it meant is we'd succeeded in carrying the big, scary capital red letter A from the word art and made it a small, lowercase and he realized that he could find art with his family, including his mother-in-law and his mother-in-law's sister, all there downtown, and through art they could engage with each other in a new, respectful, engaged way. And so for him, I don't know if art was in a cathedral in Europe or in a museum in Providence on Benefit Street, but somehow he realized that something happened there to bring him together in alignment with the community in a deep way, and he valued it tremendously. So that's what we had hoped to do, and it's very intriguing, the number of people who work with us and want to work with us, and the challenges we are able to overcome by many volunteers to come in, because we of course produce the event for free, and although it brings tremendous amount of business to downtown for hotels and parking lots and restaurants and stuff like that, the event we do for Waterfire is free. It's not, we pay the city to use the park. We get in-kind services from the city, but in order to cover insurance and boats and things like that is a constant challenge, and we largely are able to produce it through the help of both core business sponsors who help cover the costs, and the state of Rhode Island, which makes significant money off of the taxes. It generates about $4 to $5 million in state taxes each year. So we usually get about some small portion of those taxes back, which helps us cover the expenses.
It's not a public-private partnership then?
Well, we're a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so we have a board, and any money we do make has to go back to the project. So it's not an entrepreneurial project in that sense. It's entirely a nonprofit charity 501c nonprofit, I guess, organization, but it is a public-private partnership in that we have wonderful relationships with the Parks Department, the city, Public Works, the DEM, the whole state of Rhode Island, the state police. So we always work together as a team to try to figure out the best way to make downtown the safest, most enjoyable place you can visit. And partnership is an important part of that word. So it is a partnership in a very real sense of the word. I'm not sure quite what you meant in that sense, but it's been a great adventure, and it's also been made possible by the gracious engagement, not just of our volunteers, but of individual donations and the people who come to the event and make it such a surprising place to be.
What do you know that's happened because of this?
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff that's happened. It's astonishing the mail we get. I just got an essay from someone in Chicago written about Waterfire, but we get poems. We get. I should have brought. There's a wonderful poem that was sent to us by a poet in New York. It opens up with, "I had not thought of a Providence as a city in flight." It's the opening line, and it's a beautiful poem about this sense of community engagement that happened. We've probably got 30 poems. We're in at least a dozen novels I know about where they talk about different aspects of the city and things like that. Many marriages, many first dates that developed into new relationships. So. And many new businesses. Many people may have seen the gargoyles at Waterfire, which were at the World War Memorial. That was another wonderful story of two very young men in high school came to Waterfire and were not comfortable with the crowd. So they made masks to be more comfortable with the crowd. And the crowd was intrigued with the masks as they were with Waterfire. And they told me, it's been over 10 years now, this was 10 years ago, that night they suddenly realized, wearing those masks, that this is what they wanted to do with their life. And it was sort of a secret realization of the two of them, and it took them a while to even mention it to each other. And once they both realized how amazingly engaged with the community and accepted they felt that night, they chose to make a business, which is now going on 11 years, been making these wonderful creatures and featuring them at Waterfire and in many other places. They've been in New York, they've been in Washington, D.C.
We saw them in
Paris. They've been in Paris. They do a wonderful job, and there are many gifted, engaged people all across Rhode Island who have helped and have been part of making Waterfire such a success.
So now you're looking at other cities, is that right?
Well, our first focus, frankly, is to figure out how to sustain Waterfire in Providence for the long-term future. We're trying to buy a building. We want to build more boats. We've got lots of great ideas. We need to figure out how to pay for all that.
You need corporate sponsors, right?
Well, we actually need donations from the individuals who come to it. The corporate community for Providence has been very gracious and giving. We need people who come to the event to realize that they ought to make a contribution, because everyone enjoys it, but they somehow think it's paid for by the city or the state. And I would love everyone who comes to the event to make a donation of $5. And if they did, we could have the Festival of Ballet performing, we could have string quartets, we could have the orchestra. There's no end of wonderful ideas we have. And I would love that to be almost a sort of tithing that you make because you want to make it be that much more wonderful.
Or the price of a movie. Why not ask for the price of a movie?
No, that's even more than $5. But we would love to move to that, because then there are lots of things we could do. But we've exploring projects in Rome, and there are many cities around the world who are quite fascinated by what's happened in Providence. And we'd like to make Providence sort of the headquarters of an effort to really create this sort of art form that marries people and culture and music and cities in a successful way, and figure out how to do that. We recently, this last summer, lit it as far away from Providence as you can physically get, which was, we lit it at the antipode to Providence, which is actually the Antarctic Sea. But if you go north, we lit it in Singapore on the same night that we lit it in Providence. But because it's the opposite side of the globe, that was in daylight when it was in night. So we lit Waterfire there and kept the fire burning all night long, and then sent by video conference a torch and lit the torch here in Providence and lit all of Waterfire from the flame in Singapore, kept one brazier burning in Providence till dawn, and sent it by video back to Singapore. So we went all the way around the world with this artwork, with Providence being the center of the universe.
And doesn't that say something about our communications,
It does.
international communications?
It does.
I have to ask you, are you the person that dances at the opening?
Dances at the opening.
Or lights the fires?
Oh, we invite all sorts of different people to light the fires, and we've had amazingly wonderful people. I have occasionally lit the fires, but we actually try to give that honor to other people.
Okay. I want to thank Barnaby Evans for all that he's done for Rhode Island, and now maybe he's doing for the world. You have huge vision, and all of us need to drink it in and do our own creating ourselves. And I cannot thank you enough for being here, and also for what you've done.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I hope that you've enjoyed watching, and good news is right around the corner in your community, and probably you're helping to make it. Thank you for watching Good News Rhode Island.